Welcome to Kaiser Watch with John Kaiser. I'm your host, Jim Goddard.
John, welcome back to the show.
Jim, pleasure to be back on the show.
What are we going to be talking about today?
Well, we're going to beat up the First Nation story a bit more since my favorite stock, FPX Nickel, took a hit this week. There's going to be an update on the James Bay Lithium Area play, and we're going to talk about the latest Northway diamond results from VR Resources.
John, why, despite recent news that Toyota and Panasonic want to work with FPX Nickel on developing a nickel sulphate refinery, did the stock price drop this week?
You know, I last week I talked about the importance of the development a couple of weeks ago when a Japanese delegation went to Ottawa and signed a cooperation agreement with Canada, who's, we will build battery manufacturing facilities in Canada. And the implicit assumption was that Canada will also be a source of critical mineral supply that we need for these battery factories, with the batteries eventually going to the U.S. market, which of course is the biggest potential market in the world after China, where we're not going to be very successful selling much. And at the same time, JOGMEC, which is a Japanese government agency, and a JV comprised of Toyota, the car maker, and Panasonic, the battery maker, did a non-binding memorandum of understanding with FPX Nickel on that they would work with developing this refinery that could turn the ferro-nickel concentrate from Dakar, that's otherwise going into the stainless steel market, into battery-grade nickel sulphate. And JOGMEC was part of this equation, I think, because JOGMEC is connected to the big Japanese conglomerates who do have mining experience, which Toyota and Panasonic do not. And that boosted the stock. It looked like there was support from Ottawa for developing minerals that are critical and that have a good ESG rating, and that the Japanese eager to have Canada at least as a place to build components that get shipped into the United States that have a high ESG ratings. So what happens this week? Chief Chief Aslin of the Toyota Nation, which claims traditional territory where the Dakar project is located, puts out a press release, which is pretty much a repeat of what he had put out in mid-August, declaring that they have unilaterally canceled the 10-year memorandum of understanding with FPX Nickel, and we now regard Mount Sidney Williams as sacred territory, and we will not tolerate the construction of a mine that would change our lifestyle forever and have a very negative impact on us. And for a decade, the details are unclear, but we do know that such agreements usually involve payments, and they involve keeping the First Nations up to date. What are we doing? Why are we doing this? Where is this going? So for 10 years, these guys have probably been getting paid and are totally aware of what this project is all about. And the Dakar project is a very different type of beast than your typical large-scale deposit that's going to be mined at 120,000 to 150,000 tons per day. It is a natural stainless steel deposit. And stainless steel, if Chief Aslin knew anything about metallurgy, you would know that this is very inert. It's extremely important to the modern economy because it doesn't react with most chemicals, and that's why stainless steel equipment is used in all aspects of industry. And most of the supply would go to stainless steel industry, except the way they've designed their pre-feasibility study, which I talked about in early September. They are proposing to build a refinery that would take about 3/4 of the output and convert it to nickel sulfate. But the extra cost for that refinery, coupled with the sort of market price they would likely get for nickel sulfate, means that no mine operator would have any economic reason to develop this refinery, which would not be set on the mine itself anyways. So what Chief Aslin seems to have indicated is that he is a simpleton who does not understand that this mine would be a very low-impact mine in terms of the environment, would supply critical mineral in a form for the energy transition needs that do not involve polluting the downstream environment. And the tailings themselves, because of the brucite in it, a magnesium-rich mineral, it would actually convert carbon dioxide into a permanent mineral through carbon sequestration. So Chief Aslin is looking at this as a hideous, dirty, monstrous mine that will violate the environment when in fact it won't, and he's ignoring all the positive benefits that will come from that. But we already knew that back in August, so why did he bother putting this out again? Well, the reason is Monday was Truth and Reconciliation Day, a pet project of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And Chief Aslin, on behalf of the 1,565 Klassen Band members, would have noticed that Trudeau is busy talking to the Japanese and talking about mining operations, collaborating, and making this implicit promise that, yes, Canada will be a source of critical minerals. And at the same time, he sees this deal that the Japanese companies are doing with FPX Nickel, and he comes out and repeats this message, and it's literally a slap in the face of the Prime Minister saying, "What is wrong with you, bubblehead? Don't you know that we have the absolute last say on anything to do with Canada's resource extraction industry?" You're talking as if Ottawa is in charge of such decisions. And of course, because Trudeau does live in a bubble, he will never hear about this or know about this, but the shareholders of FPX Nickel saw this and immediately dumped the stock this week back below 40 cents because there's this feeling that the Prime Minister of Canada does not have the back of the mining industry. And that's been obvious for a while. Now, so if it's unlikely that Chief Aslin is a simpleton who doesn't understand that this will be a relatively low-impact mine and very good for energy transition goals, very good for Canadian employment, probably very good for employment in his own backyard amongst his people, why is he out there opposing this operation? Well, it's plain and simple. It's extortion. And I take you back to 2009 when there's a Mining Watch article that got published about the proposed Mount Milligan mine, and the NoCanDo Nation, in whose jurisdiction that was absolutely opposed to terrain building the Mount Milligan copper gold mine. And they have this quote from the band councillor Anne-Marie Sam: "This government is in a financial mess, and lured by the promise of dollars, it is willing to overlook the fact that the Mount Milligan mine will forever change the lifestyle of the people that have lived off the lands for generations and rush into an ill-prepared plan to extract low-grade copper and gold." And that sounds like bullshit, but it absolutely isn't. She was dead right about the lifestyle impact. So you fast forward to 2012 and you read this BC government news article titled Economic Development Agreement Signed with NoCanDo First Nation. And when you look at it, you see this enormous grin on Chief Fred Sam's face about the $24 million that will be taken from BC's mineral tax cut from the operation of the Mount Milligan mine over the next 24 years, and will go into the pockets of the First Nations coffers. And yes, indeed, it will change their lifestyle forever. But no longer was there any mention about Mining Watch, which really is this anti-mining lobby group, which solicits donations from all over the place and works with indigenous groups to oppose mining operations, and they are used in return by the indigenous groups to extract all these concessions while playing this high and mighty card that this territory is sacred and that nothing can be done with it until you pay us off to an extent that changes our lifestyle for the better. And that's really what this is all about. And this is a big problem for Canada because Ottawa refuses to push back on this abusive tactic to discourage capital inflows into the junior resource sector and the development of future mines that will help attract foreign companies like the Japanese to set up downstream manufacturing that creates quality jobs, which is justified by being able to get mineral feed from mines that have the most rigorous permitting standards in the entire world. This is absolutely absurd that the Prime Minister refuses to say, yes, this is part of a plan good for everybody, and push back on these extortion efforts by Canada's First Nation groups.
Are there any new developments in the James Bay Lithium Area play?
Well, the most important news that came out this week came from Brunswick Exploration, which reported that it had found a decent-sized pegmatite outcrop with spodumene on the Elron project that it has optioned 85% from Midland Exploration. And it is near Harfang's Serpent Radisson project, which was originally a gold project, but where they also reported finding spodumene bearing outcrops. So this part in the more sort of northwestern part of the James Bay area is also starting to shape up as having meaningful lithium-enriched pegmatites. Now, Brunswick acknowledges they don't know the true width of this outcrop, but it's large enough that along with the Anais target on the Anatakal project, they will revisit it with a drill program in the first quarter of next year. But the important update was that they had drilled 1,000 meters of about 15 shallow holes on the Mirage project, and they have intersected spodumene-bearing pegmatite in 12 of those holes, and one of the longest one was a 52-meter intersection. And the market was kind of taken aback. Okay, you've been drilling a month, you've drilled only 1,000 meters. You did not give any real description about what's going on. Remember, we have a trend here of about 2.7 kilometers a quarter. That's 850 meters wide, and they keep finding more outcrops, but the market is concerned about the risk that what we have here is a lacework of skinny dikes, which individually might be very interesting, but are too squirrely to mine as underground deposits. And when you average them out as a bulk tonnage deposit, the grade will collapse well below 1% lithium oxide and not be that interesting. So the stock kind of stalled. But this week, Albert Loran did a between-place interview with Killian Charles. It's about 28 minutes long. And the first 14 minutes are really worth listening to if you've been started feeling dejected as everything's sliding, like the James Bay Lithium Index is down this week again because of this general pall that has fallen over the resource sector in general. But if you listen to this conversation, you learn stuff that wasn't in the press release. And one is that Brunswick is already making preparations to create a winterized camp that will allow them to continue drilling at the start of the new year. And Killian made the point that unlike with a gold play where you get, interesting rocks, but you never know what the gold mineralization is going to be until you get the assays. With a pegmatite intersection, you see exactly the percentage of spodumene that's in there, and spodumene itself is about 6% lithium oxide. So you do your distribution. So you get a rough idea of what sort of grade the assays will eventually give you, and you can also see the geometry start taking shape in front of your eyes on a real-time basis so that you can adjust your drill pads, move it around, and start to figure out what the geometry is to set the stage for serious delineation drilling. So through his conversation, perhaps inadvertently, Killian Charles communicated to everybody that what we're seeing in the field, but can't really report about until we have assays, has got us thinking that at Mirage, we have a major discovery that's going to occupy us well into 2024 and could become the basis for another example of a world-class lithium-enriched deposit in the James Bay region. So that was the big development this week, which at first sort of started out as, it's not clear. Maybe they're not coming up with what we want to see. But then when you see the body language in Albert Loran's Between Plays interview, that's pretty good. And the other interesting thing that I noticed that Killian said was he's pretty much of the view that there's significant discoveries being made every week. And they've only reported 3 in the last couple of months, so obviously he's not referring to Brunswick itself. What's interesting about the James Bay Lithium Area play is that the companies don't need to crap on their competitors' projects. We need 60 to 120 JADAR equivalents by 2035 if Toyota solid-state lithium-ion battery is going to become a commercial reality and the whole EV deployment trend continues as is required to meet net zero emission goals by 2050. So we need dozens of CV5 type deposits, Galaxy Sear type deposits in the James Bay area. And this is going to be good because if this is adopted by all the companies where they acknowledge their competitors' discoveries rather than dump on them, this becomes a mutually reinforcing sort of drive for the adoption of the play by a broader audience. And this, I think, was a subtle but important thing that came through in that interview with Albert Loran's Between Plays. And I'm pumped up thinking, okay, we have seen it's been slower because of the forest fire closures, but there is stuff going on, which means this story will be sustained and definitely accelerate in the first quarter of next year.
What do the latest Northway results from VR Resources tell us about the potential for a diamond field in the James Bay Lowlands?
There were 2 aspects to the press release that VR Resources put out. The first was the negative news that the much larger sample of now close to 1,000 kilos of material that has been processed with caustic fusion from microdiamonds yielded only a couple more diamond fragments caught by the lowest sieve size possible. And this was from fresh rock. What we heard about earlier in September, that was from a 30-meter interval, the discovery hole, into the crater facies material surface. That's a blend of country rock that's been exploded and caved back into the excavated pit. But what they reported on was fresh rock, and it may be from 2 different lobes. This is probably a multi-lobed intrusive body. And frankly, if you're going to use microdiamonds as an indicator of macro diamond potential, this press release was a very big thumbs down. Now, there are deposits like the Victor deposit of about a couple hundred kilometers to the northwest in the Ottawa-Pisgat region, which became a substantial diamond mine with very high quality diamonds operated by Victor, which seemed to be missing the micro diamond part of the size distribution curve. So there's always the hope that if you get in there with a bulk sample and get larger samples, you'll start getting the macro diamonds that are present in this. However, the Northway 1 pipe is underneath a couple hundred meters of younger sediments that you would have to drill through in order to get a bulk sample. And because the chance that there is a macro diamond population present with no small micro diamond portion as part of its size distribution, that's a hard sell. Raising the money for such an expensive program, that's not going to happen, especially for a little junior. Now, this was the negative realization that sunk into the market. First, the market thought, oh yeah, we've got now 4 little tiny microdiamond fragments. This is great. But then they realized, oh, this is not great. The stock has sunk below 10 cents as a consequence. However, the other part of the press release, which many people have been taking for granted, is whether or not this is a kimberlite type intrusion that originated deep enough to have sampled the diamond stability field within the lithosphere. And the press release had enough geochemistry jargon in it, including suggestion that this is indeed a kimberlite, but it is what were called group 2 kimberlites, which originate from a magma that's been more mixed. They call it metasomatized from other parts of the mantle. And they are not as common as your traditional group 1 kimberlites, which are what the lactogras lava kimberlites are all about, which most of these South African kimberlites are all about. However, within the Kapval Craton in South Africa, there are group 2 kimberlites, which are different in terms of their composition. They're more micaceous, and Roger Mitchell has proposed way back in the 90s that these should be called orangites to distinguish them from traditional kimberlites after the Orange River and that in that part of South Africa. And there are examples that are diamondiferous, and the most famous ones are the Finch pipe and the Roberts Victor pipe. So just because they are a group 2 kimberlite, an orangite, which is closer to a lamproite than a traditional kimberlite, doesn't mean they don't have diamond potential. The ones in South Africa, some of them do have diamond potentials. And of course, a lot of traditional kimberlites have 0 diamonds in them. So this was good to hear that this intrusive body, while not a traditional group 1 kimberlite, is still a kimberlite that originated deep enough to have sampled the diamond stability field. But the third question really is, were there any diamonds left to be sampled when this magma ascended towards the surface and eventually erupted? And that we do not know yet. They have not reported chemistry of the kind which you associate with sort of Hartsburgite, G10, G9 type garnets. We don't know yet. But what I found encouraging about the fact that this is a true kimberlite, a group 2 type kimberlite, and it's associated with a magnetic low that's interpreted as for the polar reversal at that time. There's 19 other smaller, up to 500 meter width compared to 1200 meter width, magnetic low anomalies in the vicinity that the company has not tested. Nobody has ever tested them. And so there may be a field of these group 2 kimberlites, some of which may have a sufficient macro diamond content to be worth developing. But because the first and biggest so far does not have obvious macro diamond grade potential, that is a setback for the market. I think VR Resources needs to turn its attention to the new Boston Copper Moly Silver project in Nevada, where even if you don't hit the guts of the system, you may get enough from the initial drill program, you may get enough of the zonation part of the system to be able to vector in with more precisely targeted holes later. You can get joy. Whereas in the diamond sector, it's always an all or nothing. But it's not even that. It's even worse than that, because even if you got a macro diamond grade of, say, 50 to 100 CPHT indicated by the micro diamond results, you still wouldn't know what the quality of the diamonds are. Whereas with a traditional metal like copper, well, once you know the grade, you look up the price and you know the rock value of that intersection, and you know how close you are to being in the money with a potential future mine. So the results have for now chilled enthusiasm for a major diamond field in the James Bay Lowland area of Ontario. The story's not entirely dead, but it will require at some point to raise money to drill some holes into these other targets to see if they are also of this group 2 type kimberlite, or perhaps even ones that are regular kimberlites, because one of the interesting things about South Africa is that these Group 1 and Group 2 kimberlites are all in the vicinity of each other. So it's a bit of a disappointment, and the stock has subsided, but focus on the New Boston Copper Moly project for your hopes in the interim, and maybe next year things will change. Maybe there's a discovery at New Boston which helps them raise money to see if they can inject life back into the Northway field play.
John, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Kaiser Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as a recommendation to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at kaiserresearch.com.